Tonight, high-stakes talks at the White House. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu meet to tackle growing tensions in the Middle East and a push to slash tariffs on Israel. Meanwhile, Wall Street in free fall. Markets plunge worldwide as Trump doubles down on the global trade war. Plus, tornadoes, torrential rain, and heavy floods.
The water is just rushing so fast.
Deadly storms tear through the nation's heartland. Why meteorologists say the danger isn't over yet. And Florida and Houston get ready to face off in the NCAA title. Before tip-off, Final Four players share what's fueling them on and off the court.
Just knowing that when you have God on your side, anything is possible. So it's just a confidence and boldness.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A global market meltdown today as the trade war intensifies. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. We begin with a manic Monday on Wall Street. Today, the Dow Jones fell 0.9% or 349 points. The Nasdaq finished 0.1% higher, and the S&P 500 was down 0.2%. Tonight, we have team coverage on the tariff trade war. Senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright is at the White House, and Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London is tracking this as well. We'll have more on the global impacts and how Washington is reacting in just a moment. But Kelly, let's start with you. Kelly, before we get to the tariff news, let's get a quick update, if we can, on any news out of President Trump's meeting today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as it relates to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas and the hostages. What can you tell us?
Well, Jenna, first of all, thank you and good evening to you. There's a lot to digest about what these two leaders talked about when they met inside the Oval Office today. Israel Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and President Donald Trump, both of the men setting their sights not only on tariffs but also in the Middle East, particularly with regard to Israel and its war with Hamas, and the President and the Prime Minister stressing that Hamas must release the hostages. Watch this.
We spoke about not only the hostages, but about Gaza. The hostages obviously is a human story of just unbearable agony. I speak to the families. I spoke to them yesterday. Spoke to another one when I was in Hungary before I came here. I speak to them every day. They're in agony. The hostages are in agony, and we want to get them all out.
I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process.
A long process indeed. In fact, Jenna, the President of the United States stated to Bibi Netanyahu and the press that was there in the Oval Office that he will be talking to the Iranians this Saturday, as well as talking to Erdogan of Turkey, finding a way to bring some peace and an end to this hostage crisis that's been going on since October 7th of 2023. But in addition to them talking about Israel and the Middle East, Bibi Netanyahu had this to say about supporting the president on his tariffs that have been imposed on Israel and other nations throughout the world.
We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same.
So Bibi Netanyahu giving the president a lot of support, Jenna.
Yeah, and urging other countries to follow suit. Kelly, you know, while it's important for Israel to show this support for the Trump tariffs, what kind of response is he receiving from other countries and the European Union?
Well, he talked about the fact that other countries have been calling him, Vietnam, for example, as well as some other nations. And in particular, we heard from Ursula von der Leyen. She is the president of the EU. She talked about the tariffs as well and made it very clear that she's ready to negotiate.
These tariffs come first and foremost at immense costs for U.S. consumers and businesses. But at the same time, they have a massive impact on the global economy. Especially hard hit are the developing countries. And this is a major turning point for the United States. Nonetheless, we stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table.
And so, Jenna, the president is keeping his phone available and his door open to negotiate with all nations.
Yeah, we'll see who comes forward. Kelly, we know Wall Street is nervous, teetering on every new development. Families worried about a possible recession. What is the White House's messaging here? Are they doing anything to try to calm some fears?
Well, I'll do this very quickly. The president says, don't panic, hold on, hang in there. And his Main Street message to Main Street Americans is to keep the faith that something will take place and will be beneficial for America in getting back to what he calls a golden age of America. But his critics, notwithstanding, are watching this very closely with bated breath. Jen.
Okay, at the White House, Kelly Wright, thank you very much. Well, surrounding that White House event and tariff negotiations beyond Israel, President Trump has issued a new ultimatum to China. He is threatening to impose additional tariffs of 50% on its imports starting tomorrow if China doesn't remove its 34% retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London spoke to an expert to help break down this latest development. She has more on that. Michelle?
Well, President Trump is now singling out China as the biggest trade abuser of them all after Beijing threatened tariffs against the U.S. over the weekend. It's important to note Trump's tariffs would be additive, meaning he would be imposing a 104% tariff on Chinese goods as of Wednesday. Today, I spoke with Tim Descher, an economist from Unleash Prosperity, who says China should act soon.
Their GDP growth is a lie. What they do to their currency, manipulating their currency, what they do to subsidizing, propping up their industries to put them at a better advantage over us. China has been cheating for decades. And so what they see here with their retaliatory tariffs, they're hoping we buckle.
Now, if imposed, the additional tariffs would mean a huge surcharge on Chinese products, from clothing and cell phones to chemicals and machinery. American consumers bought $440 billion worth of goods from the country last year, the second largest source of U.S. imports behind Mexico. Descher says if negotiations don't happen soon, this trade war could mean higher prices for American consumers on everything from groceries to electronics. For example, imported cars alone could cost at least $4,500 more than average. Take a listen.
There is a serious risk that prices, not only from tariffs, are going up on consumers, but also prices because the tax cuts are set to expire. So there is a ton of work that has to be done as soon as possible here in order to get prices down and ensure that they don't rise in the future.
Now, on Capitol Hill, 7 Republican senators are backing a bipartisan bill requiring congressional approval of new tariffs put in place by the president. The bill would scrap any levy not approved by Congress after 60 days. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is leading the effort, adding the legislative branch must have a role in this to keep a balance on power. Even if this bill passes, President Trump could veto it, which would take a 2/3 vote by the Senate to overturn. Jenna.
All right, Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you, Michelle. Now to the escalating battle over a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported to one of El Salvador's most notorious prisons. The Trump administration is now asking the Supreme Court to block a federal judge's order to bring him back to the U.S. by midnight tonight. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a legal resident since 2011, was put on a plane with more than 200 alleged gang members last month. The administration calls the mistake an administrative error, but officials insist he is a member of MS-13, a claim his attorneys deny. A federal judge also said the government offered no evidence to back up the allegation. With time running out, the White House says it can't be forced to negotiate his return, while his family and the courts say his rights were violated. And for more, we want to bring in Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. Nathan, great to see you this Monday. So I want to ask you about the Trump tariffs, but let's start with this case out of Maryland. It's one of many making its way through the courts. President Trump's opponents say that his executive actions and responses to court orders are putting the country on a collision course toward a constitutional crisis. Nathan, what exactly does that mean, and do you see it that way?
Well, I think it's unquestioned that the Trump administration in the second term has been very aggressive, and they have chosen that they are going to use all levers of power or all things that they can do to get done what they want to get done. And if that means ignoring court orders or just kind of continuing on until literally physically being stopped, then that appears what they're going to do. And I think that it is a challenge for, particularly for those, let's take Republicans, for example, that there are some Republicans who are starting to see that even though they like President Trump, they believe in what he's doing at a core level, that they realize that sometime in the future, Democrats are going to be in charge, or there will be a Democratic president at some point. And are they willing to live sort of in this governmental structure where the president has so much power? Are they willing to abide by this or follow this if a Democrat is president? And so it's going to be tough. But right now, I think the Trump administration is willing to admit that, yeah, there might be some mistakes, but it's for a greater good from a policy perspective.
Now, let's talk about the tariffs, Nathan. To fear or not to fear, trillions of dollars have been erased from American stock portfolios, 401ks. Trump says the United States has been getting ripped off for way too long, and then this is an opportunity to fix that. Nathan, does this tariff plan risk cutting short the honeymoon season for the second administration? How do you see this going?
Well, it's a little bit of whiplash from Trump's campaign promises, basically, right? He said, on day one, your lives are going to be better. The cost of living is going to be down. All of your concerns are going to be going away. And that's different than the message that the administration is trying to sell now, which is actually there's going to be short-term pain, but it's for greater gains down the line. And we're going to see what that appetite is like among the American people. I think among most Republicans are willing to trust the president, but independent voters are looking at, say, hey, I thought things were going to get better when you became president, and things right now are not better. And of course, Democrats are going to oppose the president. So what the administration is feeling is that in concept, people say, yeah, we shouldn't be getting ripped off by other countries. Fair trade should be fair, but then you realize that, oh, well, all these things that I buy and I enjoy, all the prices are going to be, a lot higher. Than I think people think about that differently.
Yeah, especially with China. So much of our stuff comes from there. We'll see what happens with the president and the situation with China. This weekend, Nathan, there were the hands-off protests in more than 1,300 communities across the country. They were, protesting the tariffs, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, the cutting of federal bureaucracy. What did you make of the hands-off protest?
It's not surprising. I mean, Democrats didn't want Trump to be president again, and they are showing that disapproval. I think on the Republican side, Republicans are very dismissive of any of these, right? Any of these protests or some of the protests we see at town hall meetings or anything. They say, well, these are just paid protesters. And I haven't asked every protester whether they're getting paid or not, but I think Republicans might be missing a key some feedback that maybe the things that the Republicans and President Trump are doing right now, that people aren't very happy. And if Republicans just dismiss it and say paid actors, paid protesters, then there might be a wake-up call down the line and say, oh, actually the American people don't like what's going on, and they miss an opportunity to course correct and make some adjustments on what they're doing.
Okay, Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. We are out of time this Monday. Thank you so much, Nathan. Have a great week.
Good to see you, Jenna.
You too. Coming up, deadly floods sweep the heartland, lives lost, and more flooding to come. That's next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. Americans are grappling with shock after those deadly storms that ripped through the heartland. Heavy rain and tornadoes killed at least 19 people and are now bringing rivers to near record levels and flooding parts of the South and the Midwest. Here's Dale Hurd.
After more than 90 tornadoes ripped through the nation's heartland,
the water is just rushing so fast.
Pounding rains brought dangerous and deadly flooding. In Mississippi, residents say emergency text warnings gave them just seconds to escape with their lives.
Without it, my daughter and my grandson would have been in that room right there where there's no wall anymore.
Parts of Arkansas got more than a foot of rain. First responders in Texarkana were wading through floodwaters to rescue people from cars. On this family farm, cattle were trying to find higher ground. In Grand Saline, Texas, this man sheltered in his bathroom while the wall of his bedroom was ripped off.
I just imagine the pressure that it took to rip that whole wall off the side of the house.
The town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, underwater. At least a dozen people had to be rescued from their homes. Cities ordered evacuations, and rescue crews in inflatable boats checked on residents in Kentucky and Tennessee, while utilities shut off power and gas in a region stretching from Texas to Ohio. In Dyersburg, Tennessee, residents gathered in this shelter after the town received a third tornado warning Saturday afternoon.
We decided to come here just to make sure we were safe from the tornado.
Fast-moving heavy rains are now bringing the threat of flash flooding to the east. Among the dead, a 9-year-old boy in Kentucky who drowned while waiting for a school bus, and a 5-year-old Arkansas boy killed when a tree fell on his family's home. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Dale. And another growing crisis of a different sort tonight. The worst measles outbreak the U.S. has seen in 30 years is spreading fast. The count now more than 600 cases in 21 states. That's more than double the number in 2024. A second child died in Texas this weekend. An unvaccinated 8-year-old succumbed to complications of the measles. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. attended the funeral service. He is encouraging Americans to get vaccinated, saying it's the best way to prevent the measles. All right, up next, the NCAA championship is down to the wire. The Florida Gators and the Houston Cougars will face off tonight, and there's a lot of faith on and off the court. That's next. The Yukon Huskies claimed a record 12th national title in the women's NCAA championship Sunday. And tonight, the Florida Gators and Houston Cougars face off for the men's title. San Antonio hosted the Final Four Saturday. And while the action was intense on the court, sports reporter Will Dawson found players focused on something even bigger than basketball.
All season long, college basketball's 4 best teams were Auburn, Duke, Houston, and Florida. So it's no surprise that those 4 teams are represented here in this year's Final Four. And the players know how blessed they are to be playing on this stage.
Ephesians 3:20 is the verse that is on your social media profile. What does that mean to you?
Just knowing that God can do exceedingly abundantly above anything that you ever asked or thought about. So just knowing that when you have God on your side, anything is possible. So it's just a confidence and boldness, just knowing that. I definitely listen to worship music in the mornings before the games, but one of my rituals is always pray with my mom before every game. So that's been a thing that we've been doing since like middle high school. So faith has always been a big part of my life. So that's definitely the strength that I've been leaning on, I'll say, throughout my whole basketball career.
This weekend entirely has been a reminder that God is real. I prayed last year at the Final Four that I would just have an opportunity for this. Didn't know what it would look like, but here we are having the opportunity, and that's a blessing, and we're lucky that God gave me that opportunity. But it's just a reminder that if he's going to do that, then everything else in the Bible is true too. That means we have an opportunity to love others, to serve others, and that's what I want to do here at the Final Four. You know, I prayed for a big stage that where I can not only just glorify myself or do things that make me look good, but to also glorify God and to spread that word to others. And I'm very thankful I've had the chance to.
CBN Sports had the privilege of covering the Auburn basketball team this season and the amazing work God accomplished inside the locker room and in their hearts. And though their journey ended here at the Final Four, the players know there is life beyond basketball.
I love these guys. These are my brothers. Even though some of them, they only been here for a year, man, I feel like I've known them all my years of college. And the Bible studies, you know what I'm saying, that increased, you know what I'm saying, our relationship with each other, our chemistry. And then just letting us just be able to talk to each other as, not as just a friend, but as a brother.
It makes you want to, grow your faith. And since I've been around for 3 years and our relationship gotten closer, I think it has grown my faith. We have Bible studies before every game and, every week. So I think it makes you more invested into what you're doing.
I mean, we're all servants of him at the end of the day. And I feel like that's one thing that people get wrong, trying to chase money, trying to chase things of their flesh, desires of their flesh. It shouldn't be like that. You should chase God. You should chase Jesus Christ. He's my creator. He's my rock. Honestly, something I can always fall onto. You know, life isn't always gonna be perfect. So for me to have somebody that I can always just talk to and feel at peace, I mean, I'm grateful for that.
The word of our year has been sacrifice, and you don't know sacrifice if you don't know Jesus Christ. He's the one who died for all of our sins. It's just important for people to see that this team relies on Christ. We wouldn't be where we're at without Christ. I think this team has just been the beneficiary of the Lord's sufficient grace. And He's protected us from the things, the unseen and the seen. And like I said, we wouldn't be where we're at without Christ. He's blessed us on so many trips. He's blessed us with so much grace. And we just want to continue just to glorify His name in all we do. And by being here, we want people to see that we wouldn't have gotten this far without Christ. We can't do it on our own strength.
As you get older and get a few gray hairs in your head, you realize, you know, how good God's been, regardless of the ups and downs, the wins and the losses. What He's already done through this team has just been phenomenal. I think back to the mission trip we went to Honduras and so many times that we've spent together with this team. It's just a special team, and God's been in the locker room since day one. And so it's just a great opportunity for us to use our platform to talk about the goodness and greatness of our God.
And still ahead, a tulip field teeming with blooms and visitors. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a field of tulips in the Netherlands is attracting tourists from around the world. It may be early spring, but the tulip fields near Amsterdam are in full bloom. The blooms have mesmerized the Dutch for centuries, and 7 million of them are carefully nurtured by gardeners.
The tulips, it's a combination of everything. The blossom trees, the prunus, the magnolia trees. There's always something blooming. I think that's the reason why everybody's coming. There's always something to see.
And the garden is only open for 8 weeks, and it expects well over 1 million visitors. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Take care.